Hey everyone, I'm Will Carr. We are here for another great panel. We're going to be talking about privacy in the post-quantum world here. So we've got some really, really great panelists, and I'm especially excited to get into this one because I think privacy is so important in just blockchain in general and in everyone's everyday life. So and how does privacy play into this new world that we're entering? So I'd just like to open it up if everyone just wants to briefly introduce themselves and kind of how what they do relates to privacy, and then we can get into some questions.
Yeah, so I'm Bobbin. I'm one of the co-founders of Miden. Miden is a privacy-focused L2, and we also use the cryptography that helps it be post-quantum. So happy to be on the intersection of post-quantum and privacy.
Thank you. Hey folks, I'm Jatin. I work at the Canton Foundation as a Global Developer Relations Manager. So looking forward to chatting more about privacy and post-quantum stack.
Everyone, Harrison, CTO at HackVC. I own all the hard math that comes across the desk, so pretty familiar with all the different flavors of privacy.
So I'm Mike Lodder. I'm a core engineer at Tectonic. I've worked in privacy for a long time. About 10 years ago, I worked at Evernym. We were building a blockchain specifically focused on a self-sovereign identity. Went to the Sovereign Foundation, then went to Coinbase and did all the same stuff there before I came here.
Cool. Well, I've got some awesome questions written down for you guys. So one of the ones I want to start with is what type of information can we assume can be taken now and stored and then decrypt later?
To me, all information could, but the one I'm most worried about has to do with personal information. So most of my information, I would say 99% of it's online today, but say medical records, financial history, all of that could be taken now, even though it's encrypted. And as soon as we get a CRQC, now they can see everything. And now instead of having that 1% private space that I enjoy now, it's gone.
I would say mostly yes. I think there's maybe a couple of exceptions we can make where if it's symmetrically encrypted, using symmetric keys which are fairly large, it may be safe. I'm not sure in practice how many people or protocols are actually using that. But, if you're using symmetric encryption and large key, large ciphers, it should be fairly safe from quantum computers as far as we know now. Anything asymmetric using elliptic curves is not safe. That's the primary thing.
I'm mostly concerned about all the sort of security and infrastructure where time, these our legacy systems. As soon as you crack the access, you could shut down the power grid. And so I'm less concerned about crypto because you have to crack a signature in 12 minutes, for example, on Bitcoin. But the keys have never been rotated on the power grid.
It's not only that. To me, the other problem is, as you were saying, with the asymmetric issues, they may never decrypt my financial or medical records, but they could certainly replace it and forge the signature and say, hey, Mike has been a diabetic his whole life when I'm not. That could be an issue, right?
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah. The next question that kind of comes to my mind, because when it comes to privacy, obviously, I feel like privacy is a human right, and we all deserve privacy. And as we move into blockchain, this is kind of there's this fine line for us to walk because we want to keep our privacy. But we also have to have compliance with the government and certain places where we have to give up our information. So let's just kind of walk me through, how do we walk that line?
In my opinion, this is one of the finest lines to walk because I think and to take a step back, the reason why we don't have privacy in blockchains right now, and for the most part, is that because when Bitcoin came out and even later, it just was physically impossible to do privacy. You didn't have the tools to do it. Now we do have the tools to do it, but now the question is more about the social aspect of how if I am private, can some it's good, but if North Korea tries to be private, is that as good as or not? And I think there's I don't know if there's a clear answer. In my mind, I think I separate privacy into kind of considerations. The first one is compliance. And in my mind, compliance is very jurisdiction specific. You can't have compliance at the protocol level because you can't comply simultaneously with US regulations, European regulations, Chinese regulations, Nigerian regulations, or whatever. So it has to be very specific to a protocol, and the protocol has to be powerful enough to enable people to comply with the specific jurisdictions they're in. The other aspect of this is what do we want to have at the protocol level in terms of privacy? Do we want to have absolute privacy, or there are some limits on privacy that we can impose? And I think this is a much more of an open question. And here, I think much more research is needed. I would love to build a protocol that allows for people to be private in most situations, like fully private, not like questionably private. But at the same time, if like a Bybit hack happens and $1.5 billion gets stolen, I would also like to have some safeguards against that. And there are interesting ways to approach it, but I don't know if we have a perfect solution yet.
I think we also need to understand that privacy depends on factors where people need to trust you that they have privacy in the first place, right? I mean, we came up with like a lot of concepts that, oh, hey, this is the thing which can give you the real privacy. Hey, this is the way to actually secure, right? So if anybody has seen recently Brave has, talked about the breach in ZK and, how it's still easier to break it than what people have assumed for a long time. Right? So when you have these technologies that people have spent years to develop it, to tell people that now you can have privacy because we have built such a great tech, and then suddenly they see that it still can be exploited, right? So then they start to think about, do we have privacy in the first place? So this journey that you talk about, like of privacy, it also should involve everybody should work on a way to also bring the trust factor, that people should also believe that if I walk down this lane, if I walk with this particular blockchain or this particular stack or this tech, there should be a trust that I will actually have privacy. The whole great hack thing on Netflix, if you have seen it, was actually about people discovering that we have no privacy at all, and once that trust breaks down, it takes all the other ships with it. So
absolutely, yeah.
Hell yeah, trust. I did a lot of work on this at Coinbase. I was responsible for building up one of the teams that was responsible for like stopping the bad guys. So we did a lot in stopping CSAM and terrorist financing and stuff. And the thing that we struggled with, which was like, at what point does it become surveillance? The amount of effort it took to de-anonymize somebody had to have been worth it. So there had to have been justification of like either, people are doing like heinous things on the internet, or there's like money going to people who shouldn't like get that money. And like that ended up being sort of just like the natural equilibrium. So I think like, we have to have artificial ways almost of like increasing the friction to de-anonymize people such that it's only effectively worth it if there is justification for it.
Go ahead. I had a comment.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say, like, we often think privacy, it's all or nothing. Like, I got to go 100% anonymous, where while that's the holy grail, I don't think in the interim, in the next short term, we're ever going to get there. We're going to have to transact pseudonymously. So, yeah, I might not share all of my information, but can I, some subset of it, I still have to because of regulations that you were saying, right? In one country, I might have to share slightly more, and in others, I'm allowed to share less. If we can push regulators more towards that, I think that we will move towards a more private, respecting world. Now, the other thing to worry about is, like, at least in the U.S., we have this wonderful thing called the Fourth Amendment that can either be, abused or not. In some cases where there's bad actors, they need to be able to de-anonymize these. As you're saying, sometimes it's too high to do. And so maybe we've made the technology too good in that case, but we also don't want to make it too simple that the good guys abuse it as well. Go ahead.
I think about de-anonymization, like one thing that worries me is like, and one of the reasons why I think people like up to now did not think privacy in blockchain is important, because like you think you have pseudonymity and like nobody can see what you're doing. But the thing is, like, it's a permanent record on blockchain that even if you can do it now, 2 years later, somebody will have better tools and come back and like de-anonymize you. But the thing is, like, what worries me in this regard is that advent of AI. Like, it is costly to de-anonymize a person right now. You need to pay a lot of money. You need to go to special firms to do it. But I don't know if that's going to be the case in 2 years. I mean, there may be an AI tool in 2 years where you type in somebody's address, and if it's not like properly secured, it will give you the full history, not only on Ethereum, but on other blockchains through bridges and linked to their real world identities, and you'll basically see everything. And like, I think the friction of de-anonymizing somebody will just dramatically drop in the next few years.
100% agree. Yeah. And like the crazy thing is that like we want to build these systems also, where it's like you put your ENS handle in your Twitter profile and all of a sudden like you've linked like to your real world identity. I just wanted to touch on something that you said about like regulation. It's like the regulators actually do want to do the right thing. I did a lot of work with sort of federal institutions. After the last thing, I was doing a bunch of stuff on the Bank Secrecy Act. And we worked with FinCEN on saying, well, you know, maybe everybody's clear text record should not be accessible to everybody who is at an exchange. So we did a lot on like trust minimized infrastructure, and it took a couple of reps, but like at the end of the day, like we changed the regulation so that it was like safer for everybody. Because like, you know, private parties also don't want all their like private customer data leaking. All right, over to you.
Yeah, well, in this world, as we move in, and we're talking about privacy, like post quantum, where are the regulations, or where are the standards and stuff lagging behind as far as how we need to implement?
I think it's in
Probably a loaded question. There's a lot.
Yeah.
Right?
To me, it's how much information do I have to share? If you think when I go to apply for a U.S. passport, I have to give them my entire birth certificate and I have to give them my social security number. There's what I call the bundling problem, where they only need a subset of information, but because of how the credentials are structured, I overshare everything. And there's no way without ZKPs or some other technology, and now with a post-quantum world, I think the proofs only get bigger and take longer to do this, where you don't want to overbundle and overshare. And so where are we behind? The regulators need to decide what is the minimum amount of information I need in order to transact, and then let me hide the rest of it. Withhold it if I have to. Data minimization the laws behind it are pretty non-existent at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I don't think there is a lot of regulation done yet. Like, I think the only example that I can think of is the Clarity Act, or Genius Act, right, where they kind of gave some regulations about like how should a compliant stablecoin work, and so there are a few compliant stablecoins launched, and you know, even like I think private compliant stablecoins on Elio now were launched a couple of weeks ago or something like that. Beyond that, I actually don't know of any regulatory work about like saying what privacy is allowed and what not allowed on blockchains. I think it's super tricky, and there is like a lot of conversations to be ahead of us.
I mean, if you look at what happened after 9/11, what was the default? Collect everything. And not much has been done to repeal that. Some has, but not a lot, not enough.
Yep.
And we're still in that mentality, we need everything. Why? Because we assume everybody's a bad actor. That needs to change. And until the lawmakers embrace it, it's not going to.
I'm also thinking that a part of this is also about, we have this crowd which is about we can always do it later. You know, we have a crowd which is working very fine, right? I mean, if you have seen the demo about the wallet, right? So you're constantly mentioning about, hey, store now, harvest later, or like, you know, harvest now, decrypt later, right? So that whole thing where it can be as easy as it is like in a session here, right? But we still have a crowd which feels that a post-quantum cryptography methods can be just as simple as migrating cryptography. You know, that is like migration of your entire infrastructure. So it's also with dealing that crowd and making them know that it is not something very, very simple. You actually need to make sure that this happens. You need to believe that this is not a problem of the future, because you talk about 9/11 and we are in 2026 and we are still talking about it. That means we still have a group of people who thinks that speeding that up was not exactly the best priority at the moment, right? So I think the crowd that says that this is something that we can do later, I think we also need to make this awareness out there that post-quantum, you know, cryptographic methods are not as easy to implement as we talk. You know, if I'm not wrong, I think in the institutional level in New York, around 2024 mid-August, September, they informed all the institution and trading funds to actually start adopting to different PQC methods, right? So if they can start to inform them to start migrating in 2024, imagine you still have people who are saying, oh, we have time, especially in the blockchain space, let alone.
Yeah. Well, I think there's absolutely a misconception around this idea that we have time, right? Because it's not a problem until the day that it's a problem. And so we have time until we don't.
And I think there are two dimensions to this, right? The time in terms of like, when is the post-quantum computer becomes available? That's one of the things, and like there's some uncertainty about that. But there is like very clear guidelines, as you said, from the U.S. government, like by which time you need to be post-quantum secure. So like, if we want blockchains to be used in institutions or like in critical infrastructure, like there's just no way not to use post-quantum cryptography beyond 2030, or especially beyond 2035. That's like the final deadline. But by 2030, like any critical infrastructure needs to be using post-quantum cryptography. And so, if we want blockchains to be a part of that, that's like a no-brainer.
How's this affected by the difference between centralization and decentralization? Because, go ahead.
Go ahead and finish your question.
Well, I was just going to say, I think, when it comes to the way blockchains can be implemented and how, changes can be made on chain, the more decentralized a project is, the harder it is to make those changes. So
my thoughts on this are, in a centralization case, like banks, they know their customer. KYC, KYB is very easy, and they can withhold that information and try to keep it to themselves, and they rarely share it except under, legal warrants and other things. Decentralization, it's harder, because if I want to transact on a blockchain, who's going to do KYC for me? Do I pay for it myself? How do I know I didn't forge it? Harrison could give me KYC today, but would you trust him? It all boils down to says who. Right. And in a decentralized manner, this is a lot harder. Whereas in centralized models, we've been doing this for decades.
I think that also adds. I'm sorry.
No,
I just wanted to add this one thing, that the more centralized and decentralized one entity is, they both have their own problems to deal with. For example, when you talk about decentralization, so let's take an example. You have the Fusaka upgrade, right? People say, oh, Fusaka upgrade came last year in December, they did the changes, but the amount of validators, the anonymous people out there who are like, just, you can easily spin up a validator at this point, right? So the decentralized infrastructure may seem good in terms of the democratic internet that we want to build in Web3, but when it comes to the upgrades, the changes, the necessities, right, it also is as like harsh to deal with the whole infrastructure at the same point. Whereas on centralized, you feel that it's centralized, right? Let's do it. But on centralization, then you have to do a lot of convincing, right? That also comes with a lot of engineering, discussions, arguments, and to be very honest with you, a lot of backlash regarding like, why is this a necessity, right? So I think centralized and decentralized, they all deal with their limitation. Centralized deal with the question of why do we have to do this in the first place? Decentralized entities deal with the question of, can we really do it in that particular time frame in the first place? Do we need it at all? Because we know the amount of headache that we will get out of it.
I think there's something in there about there's already so much friction. I don't know if anybody has ever tried to work with the Church of Bitcoin, but it is painful to do anything. And so since there's already like all this friction, I think there's something in there about like, well, if we want new cryptography libraries to be in the like decentralization frameworks, then we have to have a delightful developer experience and like to remove all the other sources of friction. And I think like not to blow smoke at you, but like Tectonic's crushing it. I mean, like I think the right way to do this is to like go to the centralized parties and like they also have a lot more forgiveness than some of the tribal Ethereum Foundation and stuff. But like to hammer on the developer experience and just make it absolutely delightful, such that it's not such a huge lift.
And along that, I think, for example, Robinhood, who's starting a stablecoin, and Fidelity and all those, they're kind of primed to kind of bridge the two of centralization and decentralization. Think about it. You get a KYC, for example, from either one of them, and now I can transact. If we can get to a ZKP efficient post-quantum model, I can now transact with them saying, hey, Robinhood knows who I am. If you need to de-anonymize me for whatever reason for the Fourth Amendment, go talk to them. But everybody else just knows this person's KYC by Robinhood. That's it. I think that bridge is where we need to get to. And that way you have some trust in both systems.
Yeah.
Yep.
So do you guys think this evolves us into a world that pretty much from a consumer facing standpoint looks exactly like it does now? We're talking about things like Robinhood and the banks, or because there's the purists that want to think that we're going to all be operating on with no centralized organizations, and we're going to everyone's going to know how to operate on chain. So how do you guys see that looking and playing?
To me, this looks a lot like Heartbleed. If anybody was sort of doing like SRE stuff back, how many years ago? I don't know, like 8 years ago. Oh my God, I'm a dinosaur, dude. Where, for those that aren't familiar, there was sort of like this game-breaking bug in Intel chips, which would allow like highly elevated access on the kernel. TLDR, you don't want that, and so the patch, it ended up making like the kernel like 30% more efficient, and like we came up with like better algorithms and like did a lot of the software fixes. And so as we talk about like, well, like the signature packets will have to be larger and all this stuff, like like it's unrealistic, I think. And I think we've seen this like just sort of in the mainstream adoption of crypto over the past 9 years, where it's like people actually don't really want to like do signatures all the time and like deal with like addresses and so forth. But if you're able to make it like almost like invisible, like I think the winners are going to be those. And it's like, it's super unsexy to say, but like make the migrations painless and invisible.
Yeah, I think, from my standpoint, like there is beauty to the entire crypto and blockchain industry, and why I got into it in the first place, because it allows things that you could not do in a traditional financial system before. There are a number of those, but one of them is like basically the pure magic of being able to send value to someone else across the internet without anybody in the middle, like in no intermediaries. That's like one of the core propositions. And I do hope that we end up in a state where, we've improved on the traditional financial system rather than basically rebuild it with different set of tools. I do think that there is like a lot of good things that we can carry through. And, I don't necessarily think that whether it is post-quantum or pre-quantum, that makes a difference. Like there is no difference in this regard, but like it's just the general direction of like where we will end up. And I do think like having this level, like, I totally agree. The UX needs to be way better. People don't need to know about signatures. 99% of people probably don't need to do self-custody, to be honest. There needs to be like better tools where it is. But I do think there should always be an escape hatch that for the 1% that wants to do self-custody, they should be able to do it. I should be able to send value across the internet with no intermediaries. I should be able to have like censorship resistance guarantees that like the original Bitcoin white paper promised. Again, probably not appropriate for vast majority of people, but like if we can blend it in such a way where most people get it with very easy UX that looks very much like a traditional banking system, but has much better properties underneath, that would be like my success story.
Yeah.
To be very honest with you, I feel like this is not something that a lot of users, the other side would actually notice, because when we talk about migration, right, before that we talked about all the like post-quantum cryptographic techniques that people, established and then told people to actually migrate. And we just mentioned that the migration itself is like a pain in the ass, to be very honest, right? For a user, even right now, if they are developing a smart contract on any of the EVM L1s or L2s right now, and they want to change the blockchain, for example, if you are no longer loyal to a chain in a EVM ecosystem, you go to the other chain, just make a few changes in the smart contract. But essentially, for a user, they will feel a change in the air. You could say that, right? But the migration, I think, is a more bigger deal for the people who are on the infrastructure side, because migration always comes with a cost, whether it's the cost of time and resources, whether it's the cost of users going away because the migration is affecting all of them, right? For example, you talk about Robinhood, right? And we know all about the whole GameStop and Robinhood thing, right? So they did disabled all the buy and sell, right? And after that, that was only like about selling but not buying of the GameStop. But we don't talk about like how long it took even after the whole government involvement to still enable that. I mean, the documentaries make it show like like, it was like over the night transaction that everybody can now sell and see, and the whole Wall Street bets is back. But in reality, if anybody see the facts, even Robinhood was not able to implement these changes as fast as what people saw it, and there was a lot of backlash, because when I saw the documentary, I'm like, I am not believing this. It cannot be a one night thing, where you will disable and then you again enable people to sell out, and again all the analytics and everything is just untouched. It does not make sense. I'm an engineer. I know it's a bit bullshit. So the migration always comes with a cost. So the infrastructure level players that we have currently, they are the one who will feel the most changes, whereas the others will just see that there is something in the motion. That's just what I feel about it.
I've really asked all my questions. You guys have had a lot of great things to say. I'm curious. I want to ask a really direct question. So Canton just did a partnership with DTCC, right? So what exactly? Walk me through that. What are you guys doing for them in relation to privacy and RWA?
Sure thing. So, we all know about DTCC has like the most amount of securities and deposits and the collaterals available right now. And they have been actually exploring from, I think, what we know about the tokenization and the ways where they can actually work with blockchains for actually way before, when they announced it. So when I joined Canton way back in December, and at that point I know about that the conversation was happening for a very, very, very long time, because it's not easier, because even though Canton promise a very unique infrastructure which is built around privacy, like the sub transaction privacy, which gives you the option to only have the people decide on the components that they never want to be exposed in the first place, like, so a party can only see or should only see the information necessary, and that's what sub transaction privacy was all about. That's how Canton was built around. So when DTCC is an example of all the securities and deposits, all this, you have the assets that they have, and you're talking about billions every day, that's flowing via the whole DTCC thing. And it's just that the whole deal looks like much more of asset tokenization, but it's like they are flowing billions every day. They don't talk less than $1 trillion, to be honest. So on Canton side, if I have to talk about like their side or a user facing side, they see, oh my god, so you have DTCC, which is like the biggest, like securities and all that collateral institution out there. You're coming to Canton, that's good. But when you talk about the privacy component, I think that's the main reason why we have all these institutions, whether you see DTCC, whether you just see the JP Morgan announcement, or whether you see like the HSBC announcement. Most of these things are about like how we are able to create this infrastructure, which is more like scalability on like a subchain level, where you have like multiple networks inside the main L1, and everything is in sync with together using something called as global synchronizer that the foundation governs and looks after. I work in the foundation, so I know that internally there is a lot of these institutions are about not only scaling, but also on how can we have that privacy, how can we have that trust. And because we are not only the DTC is not only bringing the assets on your blockchain, right? It is not simple, because they're also bringing this general idea that all these major names out there, billions and trillions of assets out there, they can still be on a blockchain, they can still go after. So on Canton's infrastructure level, that looks straight as we have the sub transaction privacy, we can still have a part of it. I think that also connects with what you said. It's not about 100% transparency or 0% transparency. This institution comes with the cost of selective privacy, who see what and who see how much. For example, if JP Morgan and Citadel are in a single trade and they cannot basically reveal their amounts, the slabs, the strategies to the BlackRocks of the world, right? They definitely don't want to do that. So when you work with these institutions, they look after like how this particular privacy model that we have, which is also about our own custom smart contract language called DAML, which allows people to use this templates and this way where they define which information should be visible to which party is capable of what exactly, and what party or which party can actually observe the whole thing. So if you're not part of this equation, you can not see the sensitive data. So I think that is more of like how on an infrastructure level or on a privacy perspective that these deals are actually internally been talked about, because if you had every single bank on every single public chain in 2008, then we never have seen the housing crisis in the first place.
Right. Yeah.
I think the fundamental thing we're asking for from privacy is probably laws that allow us to be more self-sovereign. That's why we were excited with Bitcoin and Ethereum, because we're like, hey, now we can be more controlling of how we move money, how we can move data. We have yet to see a self-sovereign identity solution. Believe me, I've been in the space a long time, and there's always pushback from the regulators, but I would love to see that so that, we can do more of these transactions where I don't have to show everything. I can control what information is moved, when, where, and maybe even know who's seen it. That would be awesome, and I think decentralization is primed to help in that space.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I love efficiency is my love language, which is why I love blockchain, and obviously extremely libertarian. Which I think probably all of us are. And the next thing I would say about myself is as bullish as I am on crypto, I'm most bullish on humanity. I think that people is what makes this space so great. And I think just the people in general is why I'm so excited about the future. So as my final question, I just kind of want to open it up. What are you guys most excited about to see in the future? Like how this technology is changing the world. And I want to hear some just like real solid hype enthusiasm about the world we're stepping into.
I mean, I don't know if I'm going to say anything new, but this technology in my mind, I got into this really heavily in 2018 when I understood how it works. It's in my mind, it's like antidote against tyranny in many ways. You need crypto for the world to succeed, especially with verifiability that you can get with crypto, especially with the AI advancing. There are good intersections, I think, where you can counterbalance some of the bad things that can come from AI with some of the good things that can come from crypto. And we are, still in the process of getting there. It's not going to be tomorrow or even the next year. I think it's going to be 5-10 years out when I think this vision is best case scenario is going to be realized. But I do think we're going to get to a point where, the way people transfer value through the internet is going to be on the blockchain rails. And this is going to make it so that people have more ownership of their assets, of their transactions, of their whatever else. And that will make the world a better place. I mean, it's very trite, but it is it's going to make it more difficult for nefarious people to control everybody.
I think, crypto is trust infrastructure. And this is something that I spent a lot of time at Hack. So looking at robots and non-token deals with foundation models where it's all about the trust. Right. And so I'm excited for this technology to flourish so that we can have a utopian era of abundance rather than a dystopian era of permanent underclass.
No, please go ahead.
What I'm most excited about is I see Web3 solving a lot of the Web2, Web1 problems, especially with post-quantum, and especially since that's what we're talking about. But I see it just in general. That's what I'm most excited about. Key infrastructure, key management, identity management, money management, you name it. We're solving those problems. And the Web2, Web1 world, they're learning from it. But eventually, I think they're going to be left behind unless they get on board. But that's what I see happening is we're fundamentally changing how we're using the world and technology these days.
I mean, for me, since we're talking about a post-quantum threat era, I just want us, or maybe want in general for people, especially in our industry, because we will have the most struggle in an infrastructure level if we start migrating, right? To talk more about this, there was a really good Twitter space before about the Quantum Summit, and that was actually one of the things we all talked about, that this is not a problem for one single L1 or one single, a project here. This is a problem that every single L1, no matter if you are the Ethereums of the world, the Solanas of the world, or Cantons of the world, this is a problem that everybody has to think about. So I want that at least in the future, we want to wait for the future to come and then think about what can we do, because we are, I mean, to be very honest, I think we are heavily reliable on existing technologies without thinking about the implications. If quantum technology comes and it breaks it, like, you know, like you break like a child's toy, and we will be like, oh my god, this was supposed to be secure, even though everybody told us it was not, you know. I mean, why are you breaking my delusion? So I don't want that in the future, you know. It's more of like it, I don't want it to be like a, you know, how you see apocalypse in the future and all the post dystopian future, you know. I want people to be actually be more ready about it, because we are in the blockchain place, and blockchain is like, I mean, imagine changing all the immutable data which is available on the blockchain. I mean, it's very easy for Web2 people. They work in like this databases where you can change, reassign keys and everything. Blockchain, immutable, permanent, like, you know, like harvest now, decrypt later, again, coming back to that. So it's a very complicated situation that people are like, I should just stay and binge Netflix today, and I will talk about it on the weekend, you know, next weekend.
Don't look up, right?
So that's the thing. I genuinely want to see where people find a way where we can actually deal with this, instead of just thinking that, I mean, what's the worst that could happen, you know?
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome, guys. Do we have any questions from the audience? Does anyone have anything that they'd like to ask any of the panelists? Raise your hand. I'll come bring you the mic. Don't be shy. All right. Well, if we don't have any questions, I think this is the last panel. So any other? Oh, there is one more panel. Okay. Well, then I'll still just say any final thoughts before we close out. All right. Awesome. Well, thank you all very much. This has been great.